You're listening to the Oddscast, the original UFC betting podcast that's straight to the point. Hosted by leading MMA oddsmaker Kalikas and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. They provide you the absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting. MMAOddsBreaker.com. Don't place your wagers without us.
Welcome to the Oddscast, presented by BetDSI. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts oddsmaker Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC on ESPN 5 event, which takes place in Newark, New Jersey. If you're unfamiliar with our format, Nick and I will break down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Looking back at our last event, Kyle Marley's premium bets for UFC 240 won 1 unit overall. Kyle has his bets and fantasy MMA picks available now on MMAOddsBreaker.com on the Premium tab. Back to the present, UFC on ESPN 5 features a 12-fight card in total and will be aired exclusively on ESPN this Saturday afternoon. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking things off on the preliminary card on ESPN is a women's flyweight contest between Hannah Goldy, who is 5-0, and Miranda Granger, who is 6-0. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
As always, a couple quick shout-outs before I get started here. BetDSI.eu, that's a sports book I'm going to quote the updated odds from, so make sure you give BetDSI.eu some love. They're a great sports book. Football season's just around the corner, and they're going to have a lot of great betting options, so check out BetDSI. And as Brian mentioned, check out Big Marley 3's premium picks. They're available at MMAOddsBreaker.com on the premium picks tab. Kyle Marley has been up over 258 units in the last 14 and a half months. That's $100 per bet. He's up over $25,000. So if you're not buying Kyle Marley's plays from our premium picks tab, you are missing out. He's been one of the best handicappers in the world. Everybody knows it. And I mean, the guy just has been phenomenal, really. So shout out to Kyle Marley. Make sure you check out his premium picks on our MMA OddsBreaker homepage. So that said, getting right into this fight, of course, Goldy opened minus 130, the comeback on Granger minus 110. Right now, looking over at BetDSI, it's minus 133 for Goldy. The comeback on Granger is at plus 111. So line markets have tightened up. Early action did come in on Goldy. Now, as we get closer to fight time, we're seeing some action come back in on Granger. So there is two-way action legit on this fight, and it's going to continue to flow that way, I think. This is kind of a difficult one because Granger, I mean, both these fighters are undefeated. Granger is the submission specialist. She's a sub-artist. Goldy is a strong, physical, athletic, more of a striking-based fighter, so you have kind of your classic throwback. I mean, obviously, both of these ladies, it's 2019. They're evolved. They're a lot more than just, you know, a specialist in one certain area. But make no mistake, I mean, Granger, that's where she excels at the most. And I'm saying she has a little bit more than that because she does have a little bit of striking. She's tall. She has some length. She's an athlete. You want to talk about an athletic fighter. She's more of an athlete than anything else. She was a volleyball player, I believe, in high school. So she got into mixed martial arts, because she was always into sports and she didn't really have that fighting background that a lot of these fighters, do when they're coming into the sport. So it was just one of these things that she's an athlete. She loved, the sport once she got into it a little bit and it all took off from there. So of course she's talented and she's absorbed everything, jiu-jitsu especially, and she's a very opportunistic submission artist. So if you leave her, your neck or any limb out, I mean, she's going to take advantage of it, hop on it and choke you out. Or again, on the ground, if you put her on her back, I mean, she starts attacking right away and she could definitely submit you. So she's very dangerous on the ground. And again, a little bit of striking skill on the feet, but that's not where it's at for her. She wants to get this fight to the ground. Or again, she doesn't even need that. She can get you up against the cage and sub you out that way as well. If your defense is not up to par, she'll get you. So Granger, very difficult. But Goldy, I think, has what it takes to probably brawl, keep this fight standing, keep a little bit of space. She's going to be the stronger fighter. She is the better striker of the two. The problem I have with Goldy, she's a little bit robotic in her striking. I mean, she doesn't really flow that well, and it shows. But she's by far the better striker out of the two here. And again, when she hits, I mean, she'll do a little bit more damage along the way. So really, it's up to Goldy's fight IQ here. I think Granger's wrestling is not going to be up to par enough to get Goldy to the ground. So if Goldy keeps this fight upright, she should be able to outpoint Granger, bust her up a little bit, and at least win on the scorecards, or possibly get a finish, because a lot of Granger's fights have finished early in round one or trickled in round 2. I believe more of the amateur fights in her career have gone a little bit longer. Her pro fights, though, like I said, it's been round 1, round 2. She gets people out of there quick. Goldie is more of a decision type of fighter. She's going to just basically outpoint you, land hard shots, out-muscle you, bully you a little bit, and kind of win on the scorecard. So if Goldie fights smart, it should be her fight to win or lose. So after research, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Goldie, and I think she does probably have what it takes to win over Granger and get that 0 off her record and put the first loss on there. So the pick for me is Goldie.
Yeah, this is a battle of 2 women with different specialties. Goldie's much better on the feet, and Granger wants to take it to the ground. Both are undefeated, but watching Granger fight, she really doesn't have much of a wrestling game, as Nick mentioned. It seems like she's more opportunistic with her submissions because, for some reason, fights go to the ground, like whether somebody's taking it there or she takes advantage of somebody that was way off balance or, looking for something in the clinched standing. So Goldie will have to be protecting her neck at all times, but I think that she can keep this upright if she wants to. I think Goldie's the physically stronger fighter. Granger's fought at strawweight more in her career. Her best wins are over strawweights. And, Goldie is, while she's bounced around, she's definitely had a lot more time spent in the flyweight division. As Nick mentioned, Goldie, may be a little stiff, but she still hits hard and she's active on the feet. Granger's definitely, not much of a striker, and I think Goldie can light Granger up on the feet. And if Granger can't get this to the floor, I think she's going to be in some trouble. So even though Goldie isn't the greatest striker, she's definitely a willing striker. She's aggressive. She throws good combinations. And I think that she'll be having Granger on her back foot the whole time. And unless Granger can close the distance and look for submissions in any way possible, I think it's Goldie's fight to lose. So I'm going to pick Goldie to win a decision here. Now moving up to the welterweight division, we have Cole Williams, who is 11-1, taking on Claudio Silva, who is 13-1. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Silva opened minus 400, the comeback on Williams at plus 280. And right now, looking over at BetDSI, it's Silva minus 455, the comeback on Williams plus 346. So line margins have tightened up a little bit, and more actually coming in Silva's way. A lot of people are going to throw him into parlays as well. Don't really blame you out there. I mean, stylistically, this is a very bad fight for Cole Williams. He is stepping in on short notice, stepping in for Emeev. Emeev had visa issues, and that was a much harder fight for sure for Claudio Silva. So Silva's getting kind of a break here. I mean, make no mistake, everybody that makes their UFC debut or that enters the UFC obviously has some skill and some talent, so you can't take anybody lightly. Cole Williams has some power. He has that wrestlers kind of build with a little bit of wrestling as well. Good jiu-jitsu to go along with some okay striking. So he's a very capable fighter. His resume is not the greatest. He does have a couple okay opponents listed on there, but overall it's been his wins are over weaker competition. That said, Claudio Silva, man, he's been nothing but impressive in the UFC thus far. And I mean, if you look at his resume, it's just solid win after solid win after solid win. The problem with him is he just can't stay consistent enough and healthy enough to just, have more than one fight per year. So, I mean, this will be, I believe, the first time since he's entered the UFC that he's actually going to have 2 fights in 1 year. So I'm looking forward to it because the guy is so talented. Again, you want to talk about kind of your one-trick ponies. That's exactly what Claudio Silva is. He's so good on the ground, and he's not the greatest wrestler, but at the same time, he is effective with his takedowns, and he gets the fight to the floor more often than not. I remember, for example, a few fights back it's been a while now. It's been in 2014. It's only been a couple fights back though, for Silva because that's how inactive he's been. But against Leon Edwards, I bet Edwards in that fight and I was so disappointed. It was a close fight, but Silva did just enough to win, getting Edwards to the ground and win that fight. So that's the kind of talent this guy has. I mean, and then of course following up with some more recent wins over Talib and Roberts. So, I mean, the guy has faced decent competition, and once he gets you to the ground, you're in some serious trouble. So I don't think Williams is up to par when it comes to this matchup here. I mean, this is honestly a huge step down for Silva. He's beat far better competitors. So this will be a huge, in my opinion, upset if he does lose, despite the odds. I mean, obviously he's a heavy favorite, but I think it's actually the line's still probably a little low. I mean, again, I'm not going to disrespect Williams. I think he has enough knockout power to make this interesting. If Silva can't get him to the ground right away, he has a path to victory. But to me, Silva's path is way more clear, and he does find a way to get this to the ground. And once he does, Williams is going to be tapping. So the pick is Silva, and I understand why people are throwing him into parlays as well.
And I'm on Silva here as well. The main thing is, Williams has had a decent career. I mean, he was even in the Bellator Fight Master back in the day, making it to the semifinals. But overall, I mean, he's stepping in here on short notice. And while he is pretty well rounded, Claudio Silva has this style where he can just overwhelm people with his wrestling and submissions. He's not much of a striker. And while he is a bit of a one-trick pony, that one trick is pretty good. It's helped him get some serious quality victories over the likes of top welterweight contender right now, Leon Edwards, and most recently, Nordine Taleb was a real solid victory, just dominating him. So I think, I just don't see Cole Williams being able to stop it. I mean, maybe he can hurt him on the way in, but for the most part, I think Silva just closes the distance, drags this to the floor, and it's just going to be that'll be all for Cole Williams. Williams is a talented fighter, but on short notice against somebody with the confidence that Silva has, I just think it's going to be too much. Silva just has this way of overwhelming people, and I don't see Williams being the guy that hands Silva his first UFC loss. So I think Claudio Silva probably gets a submission. So Silva's going to be my pick. Now, dropping down to the women's flyweight division, we have Lauren Murphy, who is 10-4, taking on Mara Romero Barella, who is 12-5. Now, Nick, what's the MMA Oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Barella open minus 190, the comeback on Murphy plus 150. Right now, over at BetDSI, we are seeing Barella minus 189, the comeback on Murphy plus 156. Line margins have tightened up, solid opening line, holding steady. And there is two-way action in this fight. Line dropped a little bit, now it's coming back up. So it is an interesting fight. Another one of these ladies' fights that I think is going to be really close. I mean, I know Murphy's not the most popular betting choice for a lot of people. I mean, her fighting style, I think at times she doesn't get enough respect, but she's a very tough out. She's a very solid fighter. She pushes a high pace. She's durable. She has a lot of good experience over high level competition, and she makes pretty much every one of her fights, even in a loss, close and competitive. So, I mean, she's going to push a high pace and do what she does best all the time here. She has some wrestling. She has some jiu-jitsu skills, of course, and she doesn't have a bad stand-up game either. So she is your prototypical complete MMA fighter. And Barella, you could say, I guess a lot of the same things about her as well. She's a little bit younger. She's going to have a little bit of size over Murphy, a couple inch reach advantage as well. Her striking isn't bad. She's got a little bit of power on the feet. She mixes things up okay. I wish she was a little bit more active and with a little bit more speed on the feet, but overall, when she lands, she can land effectively for sure. She does have a good submission game and okay wrestling as well to go along with it. And she comes to fight. I mean, so she's definitely a fighter that is going to be in your face and be aggressive. And like I said, I wish she was just a little bit more active with her striking and a little bit more aggressive in the wrestling realm as well. I think that's where this fight's going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. I think it's going to be kind of an ugly, slower paced fight. A lot of it's going to take place up against a cage. They're going to be kind of jockeying for position, turning each other around a little bit. I think Barella is going to get the better of the exchanges, and I think she's going to be the one that probably wins on the scorecards, but I'm not confident with this fight. I think it's going to be a 29-28 split decision type of fight if it does hit the scorecards, but it is more catered towards Barella winning. I think she's the one that's kind of on the upswing. She's the one that's improving and getting a little bit better, where I think Murphy's kind of plateaued a little bit, and if anything, she's probably on the decline and getting a little bit, I think, past it at this point of her career. But that said, it's still going to be competitive. And for me, it is a dog or pass situation at this point. I mean, after research, I do think Murphy can hang in there a lot better than most anticipate. So I am going to pick Barella, though. I think it is her fight to win or lose. But at the price right now, even 2-1, I'm going to stay away from it. Close to 2-1. I don't think it's worth it because I think if you do hit the scorecards, then we're going to see a crazy split decision type of fight. And with the state of MMA judging, as I always say, any close fight is a coin flip with those guys. So you never know, and you don't want to be laying chalk if that's the case. So for me personally, it's dog or pass or just stay away from it. I'm going to pick Barella to win though.
Yeah, I think this fight is going to be really close. The main thing is both fighters have some decent ability, but while Barella might be a little bit more technically sound, I think Murphy kind of makes up for it with aggression and just being really scrappy. Murphy never should have probably been the Invicta Women's Champion, but, Miriam Nakamoto was so much better than her technically on the feet, and Murphy just kept going after her and then eventually became the champ. And she just kind of has that way about her. Now, obviously, when she faces people that have a big technical advantage and can withstand the pressure that she likes to put on in fights, then she's lost decisions. But she's somebody that is just tough and scrappy, and she always has close fights. And I think this is going to be no different. I think a lot of this fight will be in the clinch. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be like a split decision type fight. Barella, has the ability to get more stoppages than Murphy, because pretty much Murphy, the only way I see her getting a stoppage is if she has somebody that she can pin down on the ground and just drop some ground and pound. Because other than that, I don't really see her knocking people out with a one punch or getting a submission. So Barella, I think her biggest strengths are that she can get those finishes, but I don't think she finishes Murphy. Nobody's really been able to finish Murphy. So I think this fight just is going to be in the clinch. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be kind of slow paced, but I think that it'll be Murphy that'll be initiating a lot of the action. I think she's going to be the one pressing forward, and I think it's going to be close, but I'm going to lean Lauren Murphy. I think that she can grind this out, and while it's not going to be pretty, I think Murphy gets the job done. I think she wins like a close split decision here. Now, sticking with the flyweight division, moving over to the men's side, we have Jordan Espinoza, who is 14-5, taking on Matt Schnell, who is 13-4. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Espinoza -120, Schnell -120. That was the opening line. And right now what we're seeing over at BetDSI is -130 Espinoza, Schnell at +108. So line margins have tightened up. Espinoza was actually a little bit of a higher favorite, and now he's starting to come back down. More action coming in Schnell's way as well. So there is two-way action on this fight. And it looks like across the Don Best screen, we're starting to see some pick'em. So Schnell is getting a lot of love as we speak, and that might be continue to go that route actually. So it's going to be back and forth, I think, and it'll hover around that pick'em spot with a slight edge towards Espinoza. Might flip back to Schnell at some point as well. So we're going to continue to see a lot of action on this fight. A lot of people are going to be split. I mean, both of these guys are definitely talented flyweights. So they both have skill in all areas. They both have effective striking on the feet. They both have some wrestling. Obviously, Schnell, I think, is the more overall technical fighter. What I mean by that is I think he's, as far as skill set goes, I think he is a little bit of the better fighter with tools in his arsenal overall. I think he is probably has a slight edge as far as striking skill. He definitely has a jiu-jitsu edge on the ground. I think his submissions, he has a bigger advantage in that spot than anything else in this fight. His wrestling, it's going to be close, but I think if anything, maybe Espinoza has a wrestling edge in this fight. But the thing I like about Espinoza is the striking is going to be close. I think Espinoza has a little bit more one-punch knockout power, and he's a little bit more durable as well. So I like that. I know that Schnell's been on a roll. I mean, he's been really impressive as of late, and he showed what he's capable of, and that's great to see. Because, I mean, at times, Schnell, when he first got into the UFC, he didn't show the best of himself. He has kind of a weaker chin. That's been a problem for him throughout his career. In my opinion, he's been rocked in other fights as well. He's only been knocked out officially twice, but I mean, that is a big issue. And it obviously glared itself early on in his UFC career. But since the first two losses, I mean, ended up getting a 3-fight win streak over solid competition. And again, he's showing you what he's capable of. But Espinoza coming in and taking on a very underrated Shelton in his UFC debut, that was a great win for him. I think Shelton is a really solid fighter, underrated in a lot of ways, but Espinoza was kind of flying under that radar as well. And he's, like I said, he's a very complete fighter. He has good experience. He's been in there. He's been around the sport for a while. So his level, he's ready to hang with all sorts of good quality competition in the UFC, and he proved that against Shelton. So I think Espinoza is ready for Schnell as well. I think how it's going to play out is it'll be a close fight back and forth, but when it comes down to it, I think Espinoza can win on the scorecards, and I think he's a little bit more durable and could probably knock Schnell out if it comes down to it along the way as well. So I think he has more ways to win. I think that he's probably going to get the nod if it does hit the scorecard. So it's hard for me not to like Espinoza here. So I do think it's right now where it's at. There might be a little bit of value left still on Espinoza. But you do got to respect Schnell for sure, because he's capable of landing that one punch or kick or strike that could get you. But more so than not, if this fight gets to the ground, Schnell's very slick with his jiu-jitsu, and he can lock up a sub, no doubt. So he does have some paths to victory here in this fight. But for me overall, I like what I see from Espinoza, and I like the way he matches up with Schnell here. So I'm going to go his way.
And I'm right with you. I like Espinoza's physical advantages. He's a little bit longer. He's taller. I think that he's just as good of a striker as Schnell. And the biggest difference on the feet is obviously chin strength. I mean, Schnell's been knocked out a few times now. Granted, a lot of that happened at bantamweight, but even at flyweight, I still think Espinoza has the ability to put Schnell out if he connects with something solid. Espinoza really impressed me in that UFC debut against Shelton. Shelton is a pretty solid, well-rounded flyweight, and you beat him, you're going somewhere. And Shelton's kind of the gatekeeper a little bit at flyweight, and Espinoza passed. And when Espinoza was fighting on Tuesday Night Contender Series, he looked impressive. He had quick submission, and then he had an impressive knockout as well. So this is a guy that can be a finisher in the flyweight division. Schnell is pretty solid overall, pretty well-rounded. I do think, as Nick mentioned, the biggest advantage he has here is I think Schnell is a little bit better than Espinoza in terms of submissions and grappling, but Espinoza is probably the better wrestler. So I think it's going to be tough for Schnell to really get his game going. I don't know if he wants to extend too much on the feet, because if he shoot or throws too hard, he'll leave himself open for a big counter, and Espinoza can take him out. So I'm going to side with Espinoza. I think that he gets the job done. I think that he can outpoint Schnell on the feet. I think that he can stuff takedowns. He might even get top position if it does go to the ground. And I think Schnell potentially could get knocked out as well. So my pick's going to be Jordan Espinoza. Now, again, sticking with the flyweight division and heading back over to the women's side, we have Antonina Shevchenko, who is 7-1, taking on Lucy Pudilova, who is 8-4. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Shevchenko open minus 230, the comeback in Pudilova plus 170. And right now, what we're seeing over at BetDSI is Shevchenko minus 149, the comeback in Pudilova plus 123. So needless to say, action coming in Pudilova's way. At plus 170 at the opener, I don't blame people. I think that you definitely got to hop on Pudilova at that price, because I think this is going to be another very competitive fight. The problem being now where it's at, and with the price droppage, there might be some value kind of glaring itself at Shevchenko now, where the price drop is. So it is going to be a competitive fight, but as the line gets lower, there's going to be some value. What I'm trying to say is opening up on Shevchenko for sure, because this is a striker versus striker matchup here. So this should be competitive. Shevchenko is the better striker of the two. There's no question about that. Technically speaking, I think she's going to be the more accurate striker. She's a little bit busier as well. Pudilova's defense, she's hittable. We've seen that in the past, so she gets marked up a little bit, but she's tough as nails. She has no quit in her, really. I mean, I've been nothing but impressed with Pudilova. You can tell she's getting better fight by fight. She's faced some really solid competition thus far, and I think she does have a path to victory. I'm just not sure she's going to be able to use it. I mean, I think she needs to try to get Shevchenko up against the cage and make this an ugly type of dirty fight. Even in space, I think she will land on Shevchenko. She will have some success. And out of the two, I think honestly Pudilova probably has more one-punch knockout power. I don't think either one of these ladies is going to knock the other one out. But I think when Pudilova does land, it might be able to do a little bit more damage. But I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, because I think Shevchenko will bust open Pudilova along the way and kind of bloody her up a little bit as well. So on the feet, it'll be close. Shevchenko definitely has the edge. And that's why I think I'm going to lean a little bit more towards her, because if you look at Pudilova, again, she has a path to victory, making this an ugly fight. Like I said, pushing this up against a cage and getting the fight to the ground, but she hasn't had success. I believe lifetime in the UFC so far, she's 0-3 in takedown attempts. So Pudilova really doesn't go for too many takedowns. But here in this spot, I would definitely try to do that game plan and implement that a little bit, because like I said, even if she's close and competitive on the feet, stealing the round by getting a quick takedown or two, and we've seen that that's still a glaring problem for Shevchenko. I mean, it's something that she's been working on, and I'm sure she's going to get up to par with, more time, of course, and working with her sister, but that still is a glaring problem for her. She has to kind of tighten that hole up in her game a little bit. But that said, I'm not sure if Pudilova is the one to exploit that. So it should be another close fight. If it hits the scorecards, it's going to be another 29-28, exciting, kind of competitive back and forth type of decision. But I think the edge goes to Shevchenko. But with that said, like I said, Pudilova fights smart. She starts utilizing some of the wrestling we haven't really seen from her. She can win this fight. So for me, depends on the price. And as it keeps dropping, if this price drops down to a pick'em, exactly a pick, you have to go Shevchenko's way. There's no doubt. Because again, striker versus striker, she is the better striker. So I'm going to pick Shevchenko to win.
And I'm right with you. Pudilova is a decent fighter, but basically I expect this fight to stay standing, and Shevchenko is a world-class striker. Shevchenko lost that last fight because she got taken down and lost on the ground. And I just don't see Pudilova having success there. Pudilova's had issues with fights getting taken to the clinch. And if she tries to do that against Shevchenko, Shevchenko was a Muay Thai fighter, really good one. So if that happens, I think Pudilova gets beat up in the clinch as well. I think Shevchenko can wail on her with elbows and knees in the clinch, and at distance, Shevchenko still should have the superior straight punches and can definitely do some damage with some head kicks and body kicks and leg kicks. So Pudilova has some power, but I don't think it's nearly enough to knock out Shevchenko. And realistically, I think the only way Pudilova wins is by finish, and I just don't think she's nearly a good enough finisher. So I think Shevchenko just outpoints her over the course of 3 rounds, potentially gets a finish, unlikely, but Shevchenko should definitely at least get the job done against somebody that's going to be willing to stand up with her when she is the superior striker. So Shevchenko should win a decision, most likely. Now, moving on to the main event of the preliminary card, we have a welterweight contest between Mickey Gall, who is 5-2, and Salim Touari, who is 10-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Gall open -190. The comeback on Touari at +150. Right now, over at BetDSI, we are seeing Touari at -125. The comeback on Gall +104. So, needless to say, Gall opened the favorite, and now he's no longer the favorite. Everybody coming in on taking that plus money on Touari at +150. I don't blame you guys out there. I mean, I think Touari should be the favorite in this fight. Gall is tough. I mean, tough to call because he definitely has a great jiu-jitsu game. He had a lot of hype and buzz coming into the UFC, as we know. He had a couple quality wins off the rip, and he got a name for himself. I mean, when the UFC brought him in, obviously, it was for him to fight CM Punk after he beat Mike Jackson, of course, but it was more kind of geared up for him and Punk, and then to beat Sage Northcutt. So he got some recognition and he got some quality kind of wins. And I'm saying kind of because at least they're big names, I mean, I know Sage Northcutt is definitely a respectable win. I mean, the guy has some talent, but we all know he's chinny, and obviously Gall had a big advantage on the ground there. So that said, I don't know. I mean, I haven't been really since that time. I haven't really been all that impressed. I mean, he's lost a couple fights. He lost to Diego Sanchez. Sanchez looked good in that fight. He lost to Randy Brown by decision, which was a right call there as well. Brown deserved to get that win. But in between, he has a win over George Sullivan, which I think is on the way out. I mean, he's a decline fighter. If Sullivan was in his prime, I think Sullivan probably beat Gall as well. So that's what I'm saying. He's a tough nut to crack with Gall because, I mean, his striking is really not that good. I mean, he's vulnerable on the feet. He could get clipped. He's a bit chinny as well. So that's the bad part if you're going to back Gall here is if he can't get this fight to the floor, he's in some serious trouble. Tuhari has actually been pretty impressive. I know he's 0-2 in the UFC, and a lot of people don't have a lot of respect for him, but he does have some pretty decent takedown defense, and he is a complete MMA fighter that has better striking than Gall here. And I think he's got enough of a ground game, and his defensive strategy here will be good enough to probably keep him safe, even if it does hit the floor a little bit. I know Gall, again, that's his path to victory. He does have an advantage on the ground, but I think Tuhari's sub defense is good enough, and his takedown defense is good enough, and his striking is good enough to make life miserable for Gall. So I do like the early action, taking that plus 150, like I said, because I do think Tuhari should be favored in this fight. He's just not getting a ton of respect, but the early bettors out there, the guys that came in with, of course, lower limits or whatnot, but you guys know what the story is here with this fight now. I mean, like I said, it just seems like a terrible matchup, in my opinion, for Gall. If he can't get this fight to the floor and utilize his grappling, he's going to be in some serious trouble because he's not going to win on the scorecards. And he's not going to knock Tuhari out. I doubt that happens as well. So I think Tuhari probably finishes Gall by knockout before it hits the scorecards. Worst case scenario, if it does hit the scorecards, he's going to win the decision anyway. But I don't think he gets that far. I honestly think that he stops him. So my pick is Tuhari. And even still, I mean, around minus 120, where it is right now, hovering around that spot, minus 120, 130 or whatever, there's probably still a little bit of value left on Tuhari.
And I'm right with you. Mickey Gall's been able to rack up a few wins in the UFC, but two of them were against fighters that really shouldn't even have been in the UFC. And he's kind of been exposed a little bit now that he's starting to face some more qualified opponents. Gall is a guy that basically has a good ground game. He definitely is a solid overall grappler with some good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills, and he has a decent rear naked choke. But if he's not able to get his opponent down, take their back, and go for that choke, he gets lost a little bit. You saw that in the Randy Brown fight. You saw that most recently when Thiago Sanchez overwhelmed him. So against somebody here like Tuhari, who has pretty underrated takedown defense and is a pretty decent scrapper on the feet. Tuhari's 0-2 in the UFC, but he faced some decent veterans from the octagon, and he held his own. So I expect in this fight that Gall's going to be forced to stand with Tuhari, and I just don't think his stand-up's good enough. He's a bit awkward on the feet. Yeah, he hurt Sage Northcutt, but that was more just that Sage didn't have a great chin and didn't have great defense, and he took advantage of that. Tuhari has a much better chin and much better defense than Sage, and Tuhari is going to be putting the pressure on Gall, and unless Gall can get the takedown and immediately jump on his back, I just don't see how he wins this fight. So I think Tuhari gets that first UFC win, gets the monkey off of his back here. So Tuhari is going to be my pick. Now, moving on to the main card, we have a light heavyweight contest between Darko Stosic, who is 13-1, and Kennedy Nzechukwu, who is 6-1. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Stosic opened minus 130 and Nzechukwu at minus 110. And right now, looking over at BetDSI, it's Stosic minus 137 and Nzechukwu at plus 112. So line margins have tightened up a little bit. Seems like a solid opener. Line is holding steady. And this is a tough one. I mean, there's going to be a lot of two-way action coming in this fight because it's a hard one to call. And Nzechukwu, of course, has the size advantage, has the physical attributes. I mean, look at that physique. I mean, with that length, that's what you want with the skill that he has and the development that he has potentially to improve fight by fight. I mean, this guy can be a real threat. I mean, with all that reach, and like I said, he's a southpaw, and with the power that he has behind his strikes, he's good in a clinch. I mean, his kicks are solid. He's got good boxing. I mean, there's a lot to like about him. He is a little inactive, and he's still raw. That's a problem. I wish he was a little bit more active. And again, with experience and with a little bit more confidence, everything will start flowing his way. But he's starting to get there a little bit, So that said, he's facing a very tough opponent in Stosic here. I mean, Stosic, of course, coming off of a tough loss in his UFC debut to Clark. And it was a competitive fight. Stosic, showed some good stuff in that fight as well. He definitely has a lot of power in his feet. It wasn't his debut, by the way. He did come off of a heck of a win by knocking Kemble out in his first fight, actually. But I'm not really considering that fight. There was too much. I mean, it happened just too fast, and we got to see more of Stosic in that Clark fight than we did in that Kimble fight that ended pretty quickly there. But I mean, at least you get a glimpse in that Kimball fight to see what he's made of. And I mean, that's what kind of power the guy has. That said, he does have some flaws in his game as well. But he does look for takedowns. He does have some nasty power on the feet. If he connects, I mean, you're in some serious trouble as well. And he's a little bit more accurate of the two when it comes to strikes. Now, he is a tough guy as well, but he does tend to slow down as the fight progresses, and he's going to be at a serious reach disadvantage here. I mean, he's going to have like a 5-inch height discrepancy, and then obviously, I believe a 6 or 7 inch in pure reach as well. So that's not going to bode well for him. I think he's going to want to close the distance a little bit and try to get the takedowns. And obviously, Nchekwu is going to want to keep the length and keep the distance, keep him at space, or try to land some knees in the clinch and, you know, take advantage of his physical size over Stosic as well. So I think this will go back and forth. I could see these guys, honestly, either one of them could clip each other and knock each other out and do some serious damage here along the way. But I'm going to go with Nchekwu a little bit more. I think that length and athleticism is going to be a little bit too tough for Stosic to deal with throughout 3 rounds. And I think that Nchekwu could probably survive and not get clipped and knocked out in this fight. So if that's the case, I'd like him to probably win. Even if it goes to the scorecards, I think he could probably edge it out. But somebody's probably going to get finished here either way. So again, obviously you guys can tell it's not a confident pick. I think both these guys are flawed enough that it could realistically go either way. But I'm going to side with, again, the youth, the length, and Nchekwu. I think he has a brighter future, and I think he probably gets it done here. But not a confident pick, so be careful if you're betting this fight.
Yeah, both of these guys have some talent, but they also both, made some mistakes in their last fight and ended up losing. Nchekwu was really damning for me. He was winning that fight. All he had to do was not get finished in the last minute or two against Paul Craig, and he ends up getting triangle choked. I mean, that was really frustrating, especially if you were somebody that bet on him. Basically, he just completely blew it when he was dominating. Stosic, he's talented, and he definitely has, the right people that he's learning from, but, he's going to be giving up a lot of size in this fight. I mean, a lot. Especially for a bout between two pretty good strikers. Stosic has given up 5 inches in height, 6 inches in reach. And Nchekwu is going to have a pretty significant leg reach as well. And Nchekwu, while he is a bit inactive, I mean, as long as he can utilize that reach, I mean, that is John Jones-esque reach, 82 inches at light heavyweight. That's impressive. So, I'm a big fan of, people with those impressive physical gifts. And if, Nchekwu can utilize those gifts, if he can work a jab, if he can keep Stosic at bay with, some long kicks, I think that he'll be in pretty good shape. Stosic isn't the most active with looking to take fights to the floor, and I think that is Nchekwu's biggest weakness. Nchekwu's takedown defense has been pretty good so far. Granted, he hasn't had a whole lot of UFC experience, but still, I don't really see Stosic, easily taking this to the ground or dominating on the ground. So I expect it's going to be stand up for the most part, and unless Stosic is really aggressive, and he hasn't really been that aggressive so far, but unless he is, I think it's going to be difficult for him to get inside that reach and connect against Nchekwu, because, I mean, Nchekwu is just so quick and has, so much reach, and it's going to be difficult. So, I think Stosic is going to get frustrated here. And I think Nchekwu keeps him at the end of a jab, keeps him at the end of his kicks. And if Stosic does decide to come inside, I think Nchekwu can blast him with some knees and elbows too, because Nchekwu is a bit unorthodox with his striking as well. So I think this will be competitive. I think it'll be entertaining since they're both pretty decent strikers. But I'm definitely leaning Nchekwu because of those physical gifts. So Nchekwu is going to be my pick. Now, dropping down to the lightweight division, we have Scott Holtzman, who is 12-3, taking on Dong Hyun Ma, who is 16-9-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Holtzman opened minus 285, the comeback on Ma, plus 205. Right now, what we're seeing over at BetDSI is Holtzman minus 455, the comeback on Ma plus 346. So line margins have tightened up, way more action coming in early on Holtzman. And it looks like across the Don Best screen, we are seeing 450s, maybe a 500 out there as well. So that steam continues to come in Holtzman's way. And I think it is right. I mean, Ma is a pretty talented fighter, probably getting a little bit disrespected in this spot here. But at the same time, stylistically, it is kind of a difficult matchup for him. And I think he probably is going to lose this fight and more than likely on the scorecards. I mean, I think that we could see a finish in this fight, but I think they're both tough enough to probably survive each other. And I think what Holtzman's going to do is probably just grind out Ma along the way. I think he can outpoint him a little bit on the feet. I think Maul's going to be dangerous though on the feet. Holtzman has to be cautious. It has to be careful because I think Maul actually has a little bit of reach in this spot. And if he could be a little bit more effective in the striking at times as well. But Holtzman's going to be the one that's pushing forward, mixing it up, pinning Ma against the cage, looking for some takedowns as well. I think Holtzman is also going to be okay on the ground. I think he's going to probably be the one obviously in top position. Ma does have a submission game as well, but I think Holtzman's submission defense is good enough that he's not going to get caught up in that. So I think it is going to be a pretty back and forth type of fight, but it's going to be Holtzman the one that's kind of controlling the pace and the action and outscoring and outpointing Ma. And like I said, maybe doing some damage along the way and getting this decision. So I mean, as the line creeps up even more, closer to 500, you definitely have to stay away from it because Ma's starting to get disrespected, but I don't think he does win this fight. So it's one of those situations you probably pass and, you know, you're almost missing the boat right now. I mean, if you get Holtzman around 400 or so to throw him in a parlay, but as it creeps up even more so, then you probably want to stay away from this fight altogether. But that said, for me, I'm not going to spend more time on it. I think it will be a fairly competitive fight, but Holtzman's going to outpoint Ma and get the W.
Yeah, Ma is a decent grappler. He's got some submission skill, and when he's been in those slugfests on the feet, they've been really entertaining. So potentially he could sucker Holtzman into a brawl, but overall, I just think Holtzman is just puts on a little bit too much pressure in fights. He moves forward well. He's aggressive. He has pretty good wrestling. He should have the wrestling edge in this fight. And in terms of striking ability, even though Ma has been in some absolute wars on the feet, Holtzman actually is, he lands a better percentage of strikes. Holtzman lands more per minute. He actually absorbs less per minute, and his striking defense is better. So, I think Holtzman can hold his own on the feet, and then he should have the edge if it does go to the ground, just with his wrestling being better. He's more successful with takedowns. He shoots for them more often. His takedown defense is way better. And, I just feel like this is Holtzman's fight to lose. Unless he gets clipped along the way, he's made some serious advances in his overall skill set. And Ma has just kind of been stagnant so far. He's had some wins here and there, but for the most part, he's been more of a guy that people are racking up wins against if they want to take it to that upper level of the lightweight division. And I think Holtzman has the ability to defeat Ma pretty easily here, as long as he doesn't do anything silly like leave his chin out or leave his neck exposed. So unless Holtzman makes some huge mistake, I think this is absolutely his fight to lose. I think he can easily win a decision, and he might get a finish along the way. Now, moving up to the middleweight division, we have Trevin Giles, who is 11-1, taking on Gerald Meerschaert, who is 28-11. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Giles open -125, Meerschaert -115, and right now over at BetDSI, we are seeing Giles coming in -169, Meerschaert at +141. So more action coming in Giles' way. Line creeped up even higher. Now we're starting to see some more action coming in Meerschaert's way as well. So probably not as bad as people think at the sports books as far as Giles action goes, because there is a lot of people that are going to bet Meerschaert as well. This is an intriguing fight and an interesting fight. I mean, I've honestly been disappointed in some ways with Meerschaert, more so than Giles, because I think Meerschaert is such a talented fighter, especially when he gets the fight to the ground, that, I mean, at times he is disappointing, because when he doesn't have success, then, he kind of, I want to say wilts under pressure, but it's not really that fair to say, because if you look at the people that I'm claiming that he wilts under pressure, Thiago Santos, Hermanson, I mean, two guys that really I mean, are in line for a title. Obviously, Santos fought John Jones really well, and then Hermanson coming off that amazing win over Jacare as well. So I guess you got to kind of give him a pass for those losses in a way, but still, I don't like what I see from Meerschaert's overall striking game. I don't like what I see with his conditioning as he slows up as the fight progresses, especially if he's having trouble struggling getting the fight to the floor. But he is a talented fighter, and all it takes is one mistake from any one of his opponents, and Meerschaert can lock up a choke and get you out of there quickly. So I think he's going to want to get this fight to the floor. And even though Meerschaert has okay wrestling, no doubt, I think Giles could probably stuff the takedowns and keep this fight upright. And then on the feet, he's going to have a big advantage over Meerschaert. Meerschaert always got to, he's going to be dangerous. He's a savvy vet. Of course, you got to respect that. But if it stays on the feet, the speed and the power of Giles is going to have a lot of effective damage on Meerschaert along the way. And I think he could probably knock him out. So it's all going to come into can Meerschaert, it's going to come into play if Meerschaert can get this fight to the ground, or does Giles keep this fight upright a little bit. So with that said, I'm going to pick Giles as far as a pure pick goes to win this fight, but it is a sneaky good fight, meaning that I think Meerschaert could be a live dog here in this spot as well. So it's another tough one in my opinion, because again, Giles could be winning this fight and on his way to a decision, and then maybe early round three or something, gets caught in a crazy choke. As Meerschaert, like I said, he's so sneaky and so slick, and we were talking about opportunistic submission artists. I mean, that's exactly what Meerschaert is in this spot as well. So that's the concern here. More than anything else is, I mean, Meerschaert doesn't need much to pull this win off as far as the ground goes, but I still am going to have a little bit more confidence in what I've seen from Giles overall. I think Giles is the better fighter minus the ground game. So I think he could probably fight smart enough to outpoint Meerschaert and maybe even finish him on the way if he keeps this fight upright. So the pick is Giles, but be careful if you're betting this fight as well.
Yeah, this is an intriguing battle because Giles is a guy that was in really good shape overall, and he looked like he could be a serious player, and then he goes out and gets clipped in the third round against Zach Cummings, and he gets finished with a guillotine choke. So ends his unbeaten streak. And Meerschaert, while he has lost 3 times in the UFC, as Nick mentioned, 2 of those losses are to top contenders. So it's not nearly as bad as it looked initially. That last fight, while he lost it, it was competitive, and it was against, Corey Holland, a pretty talented middleweight. So, I'm going to give Meerschaert a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, but that being said, matchup wise, you have to think that Trevin Giles is in good shape here, because Meerschaert's most dangerous with submissions. And, Trevin Giles is he's an aggressive striker. He's a good wrestler. His takedowns, I mean, he looks for them offensively, and he's very successful with them. And on the feet, he's a pretty good striker. I mean, he has decent strike defense, actually well above average. And offensively, he pushes a much higher pace on the feet. So I would expect in a stand-up fight that Giles should have a significant edge. Meerschaert's a little bit awkward on the feet. I mean, he has some power, but for the most part, he doesn't really, I mean, I would expect that Giles would get the better of him here for sure. What will be most interesting is to see if Giles does pursue takedowns, because Meerschaert can be pretty crafty off of his back, whether it's with sweeps or with submission attempts off of his back. He might go for a triangle choke or a guillotine or an armbar. And Giles does look for a ground and pound from top position as well. So, if it does go to the ground, I would think that, yes, Giles should have, the top position edge, but Meerschaert's going to be a threat the whole time. And, that does make it interesting. So, I think Giles would be best off just keeping this on the feet and outworking Meerschaert and earning a decision. But, he might just, if you're a good wrestler, you're looking for takedowns consistently in fights the way he does, and, he averages almost 4 takedowns per 15 minutes. So that's going to be something in the back of his head pretty much the whole fight. And, if he sees an opportunity, he could just instinctively shoot for one. So, and that could put him in a perilous situation. So, I think, and especially with Giles coming off of getting submitted, granted he got hurt first before he got submitted, but I think Meerschaert's just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than Zach Cummings with submissions. Probably more dangerous. So Giles definitely will have to be protecting that chin and just being a little extra cautious. Hopefully not too cautious, because we've seen that happen before, where a fighter gets that first loss and then they're completely different fighter the next time out. But as long as Giles still has that same swagger and still believes in himself the same amount even after getting that first professional loss, I think he'll be in good shape here. I mean, the numbers are just too glaring in his advantage. Meerschaert does have some reach advantage, but he doesn't really know how to use it. So I would think that Giles should get the edge just about everywhere, as long as he doesn't get caught with a submission or something. So Giles is going to be my pick. Now moving on and dropping down to the lightweight division, we have Joaquim Silva, who is 11-1, taking on Nasrat Haqparast, who is 10-2. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Haqparast open minus 230, the comeback on Silva plus 170. And right now what we're seeing over at BetDSI is Haqparast minus 256, the comeback on Silva plus 206. The line margins have tightened up a little bit, pretty much holding steady overall. We're starting to see some trickles of action coming in, a little bit more so, some movement on Haqparast as a favorite, slightly climbing a little bit more. I think that as well. I mean, Silva is definitely a respectable opponent. I've been nothing but impressed with Haqparast, and if you guys have listened to the podcast, I've picked him pretty much every fight so far that he's been in the UFC. I saw the talent before he made his debut. I know that was kind of a tough short notice fight that he stepped in against Held. He was pretty competitive in that fight as well. Just, the cardio, got to give Held credit for that W. But since that time, I mean, Haqparast has really showed us a lot more than what we kind of expected from him, I think. He opened up a lot of people's eyes. And again, the talent is there. He's only getting better. He's young. He's 23 years old. He's strong for the weight class. His striking is on point. He's got good wrestling. He's got good takedown defense. I mean, this guy is a beast at 155 pounds. There's no doubt about it. But Silva, again, it's a pretty interesting challenge for sure, because Silva has a lot of good things about him that he can bring into this fight, and challenging aspects to his game. I mean, he's definitely a pretty good striker. He is a ground threat a little bit as well. He's precise with his striking, and he does have that kind of knockout power where Haqparast is hittable. We've seen it in fights. I mean, he's definitely all the compliments I just paid him. I mean, there is some holes in his game, and defensive striking is one of them. And Silva can find that distance and find the timing and utilize his strengths. He could probably have a little bit of success on the feet with Haqparast, and that's where the danger comes into play for Silva. In being effective enough to probably take this fight from Haqparast, because I don't think he's going to be able to do it if he hits the scorecards. I think Haqparast wins on the cards, and I think Haqparast probably has a better shot at finishing this inside as well. Silva is pretty tough, though. It's going to be hard for Haqparast to stop him, but I do think that, I mean, he's kind of coming into his own right now, and I think that he's only going to get more confident fight by fight. I know he kind of had a head scratcher in his last fight, and I'm saying that because he wasn't able to get rid of Gowdy in his last fight, and he's got kind of a suspect chin. But that said, again, even though that was a bit surprising, I think he's got to just be a little bit more hungry to get the here and perform a little bit better than he did. Not that it was bad, because I think Gowdy's a very underrated fighter at times, but he is a chinny guy. So again, surprised he wasn't able to finish that. But that said, this is a different matchup. It's going to be tough again to finish Silva, but he doesn't really have to do that. I think if his fight hits the floor, Haqparast will probably be on top. If not, he's going to be the one controlling the tempo of this fight, dictating the pace of this fight, and just basically outpointing Silva, doing the more effective damage along the way as well. So I do like what I see for Haqparast, and I think he gets another quality win here. And really, sky's the limit. If he keeps on improving, I know he's been working with TriStar and crew for a while, and he is getting better, like I said. So man, if he gets a solid win here, I'm interested and curious to see how the UFC matches him next, because this guy legitimately can definitely be a top 10 lightweight fighter. And that's saying a lot, because we know what kind of Shark Tank the lightweight division is, but I think he's got the potential to be that. So my pick is Haqparast, and I think he gets it done on the scorecards, at least, if not, maybe even a finish as it goes.
Yeah, this is an intriguing one, because both guys have had some pretty good recent success in the UFC. Silva especially, surprisingly has gone 4-1 inside the octagon, I think. And I just did not expect that out of him. He's a pretty well-rounded fighter, But for the most part, I didn't think that he had any one particular skill that was good enough for him to be able to get all these wins. But it seems like with a decent enough striking, he's been able to do it. That being said, he's definitely had some moments where he looked vulnerable. And I thought he looked pretty vulnerable in that last fight against Gordon. And he was losing, but Gordon, got clipped in the third round and finished. So, props to Silva for, not giving up. But overall, I think Haqparast is the more dangerous fighter. But what's really interesting about Haqparast is, this guy is a knockout artist. I think he won 8 fights in a row by knockout before he came to the UFC. And then he's had 3 straight decisions, including the most recent one against Thibault Goudy, a guy that does not have a very good chin at all. And he won the decision, and it was a fight of the night, but somehow he wasn't able to get a finish. So that was surprising to me. But where he really stood out was against Mark Diakese. I mean, that's a talented fighter, and Haqparast was able to really outpoint him over the course of 3 rounds and outstrike him and avoid the ground. And it was just a really solid overall fight. And in this contest, Haqparast is going to have some physical advantages. He's going to be about 3 inches in reach, 2 inches in height. And I do think that he has some that finishing ability. He just hasn't shown it in the UFC yet. And I think that he's going to get that finish in this fight, actually. I think Joaquim Silva is vulnerable on the feet. Defensively, he's not particularly effective. He doesn't land nearly as often. Haqparast is more aggressive, throws more often, absorbs less. I just feel like Haqparast should be able to get the job done here. Joaquim Silva has a good UFC record, but he hasn't really beaten any big names in the lightweight division yet. And I think Haqparast is one of the best strikers he's faced so far. And I think Haqparast is going to get the job done. I think he's going to outwork him on the feet. I think he'll be able to avoid a lot of Silva's strikes. And I think at some point Haqparast connects on that chin, and I think he hurts Silva and puts him out. So I think not only does Haqparast win, I think the decision streak ends with this fight, and Haqparast ends up collecting a knockout. So Haqparast is going to be my pick. Now, moving on to the co-main event of the evening in the lightweight division, we have Jim Miller, who is 29-13 with 1 no contest, taking on Clay Guida, who is 34-15. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Miller opened minus 185, the comeback on Guida plus 145. And right now, looking over at BetDSI, we are seeing Miller minus 152, Guida plus 127. So again, line margins have tightened up. A little bit more action coming in Guida's way. Man, I wish this fight kind of took place maybe 5-6 years ago. Because I think these guys would be obviously a lot more in their primes at that point. And I mean, these two were 2 of the better fighters in the lightweight division for a long, long time. And it's funny that they're now just getting matched up against each other because, I mean, again, a lot of similarities. They have the wrestling backgrounds, of course, that they like to utilize. I guess that's the main similarity out of the two, even though they're both, I mean, veterans of the sport, been around the UFC for a long time, have just incredible resumes and have accomplished a lot. So it's interesting because, again, I think there's a lot of similarities, but again, they are different fighters. And I think the differences are really Miller is just a better overall technician. I think he's a little bit better and more technical on the feet. Obviously, his submissions are way better than Guida's on the ground. I mean, Miller is one of the best submission fighters in the UFC period. I mean, time and time again, we've seen him pull off some tremendous subs. Now, as he's kind of hitting that decline spot, I know he's been putting on some pretty impressive performances off and on still, but he's not the same fighter as he was. Make no mistake about that. He's getting taken out a little bit more. He's been subbed a little bit as well. So his defense is getting a little bit worse in those areas. Guida, you can say a lot of the same things about, though. I mean, as far as him being hot and cold a little bit, he's definitely a declined version of himself. himself, but he still has it in him, and he showed us some decent moments, and he pushes a high pace. He's going to be in your face. He has pretty good wrestling, as we've seen as well. So this is going to be an intriguing fight, because I think it's going to basically come down to whether Miller can finish this fight or not, because if he doesn't finish Guida, if he doesn't finish him by either knockout or submission, the scorecards will be close, but I think it probably goes to Guida, because I think in round 2, round 3, that's where he's going to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. And I think he probably loses round 1 to Miller. But again, everything's going to kind of change if he doesn't get beat and finished in round 1. I think the tempo is going to change. If the fight's going to change, Guida will start picking up the pace a little bit more. And I think he probably pulls away with the scorecard. So in this particular fight, I don't think Miller wants to see the cards. I think it's Guida's fight to win or lose when it comes to that. So if he can avoid being submitted, and again, overall, Guida throughout his career, I think, has become a better overall fighter, and that includes defensively on the ground as well. But we've seen him lately, to studs, but he's been getting submitted. So it's not out of the question now, even though Guida has shown improvements throughout his UFC career in that area. Both these guys are declining, and they're going to make some mistakes they kind of wouldn't make in their prime either. So there's a lot kind of going back and forth on this fight, and a lot of things that you could say, point out advantages for either fighter at this point. Like I said, a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences as well. So it should be a close competitive fight if it's the scorecards, but I am going to go Guida's way. As long as he doesn't get finished, I think he probably gets it done. He edges this fight out. So the pick is Guida for me.
Guida's biggest problem is, he's just not that technical of a fighter. And stepping in against Jim Miller, he's definitely going to be giving up some technical advantage. Miller is, I think, the better boxer. Miller is the better submission artist. And Guida is probably about as good as Miller, if not maybe a little better with wrestling. But he's going to be playing with fire if he's constantly shooting for takedowns. And as Nick mentioned, maybe Guida can wear on and take over as this fight goes. But Miller isn't the worst with cardio. I think he got a bad rap when he was really suffering from the Lyme disease. So, but for the most part, his conditioning has been decent throughout his career. So, I think Guida's going to be in some trouble. You look at the last fight, even Guida against BJ Penn, he lost that first round pretty convincingly. And Miller is not going to gas the way that Penn always does in his fights. So, I think Guida's going to be in a little bit of trouble here. I think as this fight wears on, Miller should be getting the edge on the feet, and I don't think Guida will do enough on the ground with wrestling to beat Miller's grappling. So it probably stays on the feet for the most part, and I think while Guida does have some pop in his hands and he's aggressive and can push a pace, in terms of everything else, I think defensively Miller's just a little bit better. I think Miller's definitely better offensively in terms of landing, and Miller surprisingly lands at a higher rate per minute than Guida as well, just because he actually connects with his strikes compared to Guida. So I think this is Miller's fight to lose. And as long as he doesn't completely gas, I think he can at least win 2 rounds and take a decision. Guida's pretty tough to finish overall unless you've got some serious power or, you are a lethal submission artist. But I think Miller can get the job done here. I think Miller gets a decision. Granted, I should warn you, I think I'm 0-4 or 0-5 in the last 5 Jim Miller fights. So I don't exactly have the best read on the guy, but in a battle of 2 veterans here, I think Miller should get the job done as just the more technically sound veteran of the 2. Now, this brings us to the main event of the evening in the welterweight division. We have Colby Covington, who is 14-1, taking on former champion Robbie Lawler, who is 28-13 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Covington minus 175, Lawler plus 135. Now looking over at BetDSI, we're currently seeing Covington minus 222, the comeback on Lawler plus 180. So line margins have tightened up, early action coming in Lawler's way. Covington kind of ballooned up a little bit more than that. Now we're seeing some action back Lawler's way as well. Of course, he's going to get some respect. Former UFC champion. Of course, Covington, former interim. UFC champion. So this is a good matchup, and styles make fights again. And it's intriguing because obviously we know how this fight's going to kind of play out, meaning if Lawler's going to have success in this fight, he has to do what he's gotten great at overall, and that's stuffing the wrestlers' takedown attempts and beating them up on the feet. I mean, that's what kind of got him towards the title. And I'm saying that because he was able to, when he made his run in the UFC, he spent a lot of time. He knew that he was going to have to battle through a lot of stud wrestlers in the welterweight division, of course, and working with wrestlers this whole life. Lawler finally got to the point where he was stuffing some high caliber wrestlers' takedowns. And then again, I mean, his striking's always been, I mean, just nasty. He obviously with the knockout power that he has, fight IQ that he has with the striking on the feet, the technique, everything just blends in perfect. So with Lawler having that kind of KO power and having takedown defense like he's had, man, I mean, he's just a hard matchup for a lot of these fighters. But now, as we're seeing, he's 37 years old. He's definitely declined a little bit. That said, he can still beat most guys. I'm not saying he's not championship caliber anymore, but he's still not the same fighter. I don't think he is going to probably get that strap again. I mean, you know, sadly to say, I'm sure a lot of you guys can agree with that, but still doesn't mean he can't be a gatekeeper. And that's exactly what kind of the UFC is using him for. Now, again, if he gets on another run here and just kind of beats all the contenders, of course, he'll get another shot at the title, but I don't think he's going to have that kind of success. And I actually think Covington's probably going to beat him here in this spot. Again, I know Lawler has the edge on the feet, but Covington's wrestling is, I mean, just quality, high caliber wrestler. He's definitely one of the best wrestlers in the UFC right now. And I think that obviously combined with his improving stand up, I mean, he doesn't want to sprawl. I mean, he doesn't want to go that route with Lawler sprawling and brawling with him, because eventually Lawler, even though Covington has showed a pretty tough chin, eventually Lawler will get the best of him. So Covington has to make this an ugly fight. Covington has to try to utilize a lot of the same things that actually RDA did against Lawler in that fight as well. I mean, RDA was able to have some success taking Lawler down, and that's the thing with Lawler. I know that he actually, you know, obviously got the raw stick against Ben Askren. That was definitely an early stoppage from the referee, but he started to show a little bit more life with the takedown defense. I mean, he was starting to obviously give Askren some problems in that regard before Askren locked up that headlock or whatnot. But that said, I think Covington is capable of actually doing better than Askren did, because I think that Covington overall, with his striking, with the pace that he kind of will push forward, and he can close that distance a little bit more and just kind of make Lawler think a little bit more, because he's going to have to worry about the striking a little bit, because he does have some power, Covington, that he's going to bring at him. And again, in a case like a guy like Ben Askren, you don't really have to worry about his striking all that much at all. So it's a different type of fight. So I think that Covington right now, I mean, I am concerned a little bit. He's been out for over a year since that RDA win. But I think he should still be okay. So I think Covington honestly gets the job done here. He's been very underrated. And again, with the improvements that he's made in his game, his stand-up is actually halfway decent now as well. But again, I think he needs to utilize his strength, and that's just controlling this fight and just making an ugly, gritty, grueling type of fight. That's going to be tough for him as well, because he's going to be absorbing some punishment, of course, along the way. But I think he's tough enough to take it, and he's tough enough to get this job done and winning this fight. So I'm going to pick Covington to get the W here over Lawler. I just think he's just going to be a little bit too much. Even though the improvements Lawler's made through his career in the wrestling department, I just think that right now Covington's going to be just a little bit too much for him to handle in that regard. And I think Covington does what he does best and wins this fight that way. So the pick is Covington. And as far as value goes, I think we're probably going to continue to see this line kind of creep down a little bit, and then it might spike back up if the fight takes place. So just kind of time it. If you like Covington, then you just kind of have to time the price, because I think you probably will get a better price than you're getting now. And if you like Lawler, again, maybe hop in now, because I think the price is going to drop, and then we might see a spike again before the fight actually goes off. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to watch the line movement here and which way the action does close. But my pick is going to be Covington. I think he does get it done, and I'm glad to see him back in the cage.
And I'm right with you. Robbie Lawler definitely has the ability to beat just about anybody, and he's picked up wins over wrestlers. But Covington has really advanced his game. I mean, he's not exactly the most technical striker on the feet, but he's aggressive enough, and that actually makes up for it. I mean, he strikes when he needs to, he wrestles when he needs to, and he's just pushes a really hard pace. I mean, when he needs to get takedowns, he's going to be pursuing the takedown. I mean, he averages about 5.5 per 15 minutes, and this is a 25-minute fight, and we know that Covington can go. I mean, he's gone 25 minutes before, no problem. So, I know it's MMA math, but you just kind of have to compare how these guys did against some common opponents. And, Rafael dos Anjos was able to get takedowns against Lawler and definitely was not able to do that against Covington. It was Covington that was in his face for the 25 minutes. So I just don't think that Lawler's going to be able to stuff the takedowns over the course of 25 minutes. Yes, Lawler should be the better striker, but Covington has been able to get in the face of better strikers too, and score points, which surprised me. I thought that he'd be exposed against good strikers with decent takedown defense, and it just didn't happen. Covington has good durability. He can take a shot because Lawler can hit hard, but as long as Covington is getting in Lawler's face and not just staying in boxing range the whole time, he should be in pretty good shape. I think a lot of this fight will be in the clinch. I think it'll be phone booth style a little bit with Covington pressing forward, trying to force Lawler to fight off of his back foot. And then I think there's going to be a lot of takedown attempts coming from Covington as well. The only issue I have with Covington is that he's coming off of a long layoff. He's coming off of an injury. So if he's not at 100%, Lawler definitely has a chance. I mean, Lawler's going to have a puncher's chance anyway, but for the most part, Covington's chin has held up really well. So I think it's going to be very difficult for Lawler to get the win here unless Covington has slowed down or his cardio isn't in good form. I just think Covington's going to be too aggressive, and while Lawler is still very dangerous, the fact that he lost to Dos Anjos, that he air quote lost to Askren, I don't like his performances there. I think he's had some issues with wrestlers where in the past he didn't. So I think his takedown defense is not as good as it used to be, and I think Covington is going to take advantage of that. So I'm going to side with Covington. I think he gets the win, and then they're going to have eventually that fight between Usman and Covington to see who is the superior wrestler champion in the UFC. So my pick is going to be Covington. So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC on ESPN 5. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter because that's where we post them first. We can also notify you of a free bet via email alert if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsBreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Special thanks to BetDSI. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.